live downstream. We all live down.
Hello and welcome to episode number 16 of the Packrafting Life podcast. I am your host, Lizzie Scully, and today I am chatting with Alejandro Strong, owner of Packraft, Maine, and an avid bikerafter. Today we'll talk about a route that he's established around Maine, along with efforts he has made to both get more people into packrafting in the Northeast generally, but also to get a more diverse population of people packrafting. So I am so excited to have Alejandro on the show. Alejandro actually will be joining us this fall to teach a Latina Outdoors program through the Armida Huerta Adventure Fund in conjunction with Four Corners Guides, and we are excited to have him. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Alejandro Strong, and I am Packraft, Maine. I've been leading paddling trips in Maine for about 25 years now, and Packraft focused for 4 or 5 years.
Cool. I want to ask you more about the guide service, but I'm kind of interested in your background in adventuring. Are you from Maine originally?
Okay. I grew up in South Florida, about 2 hours north of Miami, and started coming to Maine to work in the summers when I was about 18. And then we've been here full time for about 12, 13 years now.
So you were in outdoor education in Florida? Like, is that why you would come to Maine in the summers?
So I worked a little bit in outdoor education in Florida. Like in high school, I worked at sailing camps, really have been on the water since a little kid, and sort of focused on it was pretty cool as a high schooler to get to teach people water-based skills. So in that case, sailing. And then I won a scholarship to do an Outward Bound course when I was 17. And that was through Hurricane Island Outward Bound, but it was 3 weeks of canoeing in northern Quebec. The following summer, when I was 18, I came back and volunteered for a little bit at Outward Bound, but then ended up staying to work a little bit longer. 19, I started interning at Outward Bound, and so it was, every summer of college, I was coming up and working for Outward Bound, and I spent 15 years with them. A lot of it seasonal, some of it year round. Yeah, and then eventually, when I was leaving Outward Bound, started trying to figure out how to guide on my own.
Curious how old you were when you decided to guide on your own and what you focused on.
I was probably in my mid 30s, and my first attempt at guiding was a canoe guiding service. And I was trying to partner with artists or authors. So it would be you go on a trip, but there's also an element of learning or creativity involved. It turns out that was a really hard business because people were both intimidated by being outside and whatever creative endeavor we were doing. And there's a million canoe guide services in Maine. So one young guy from South Florida, it's not really the best marketing campaign. And I was around the time I was starting to get into packrafting personally, was looking around and was like, oh, the next closest people are in Colorado. I think I should make this switch. And I was just loving packrafting and thought Maine's a perfect place to do this. We have tons of small bodies of water connected by biking or hiking. So just, started to slowly make the switch personally, and then eventually switch the whole business over. And haven't looked back.
I'm going to take a step back and have you tell me how you got into packrafting.
So I had read about Packraft for a very long time. People were it was always coming up. And it was that thing that I was always if I want to see one, I want to try one, and never really had that opportunity. And then thanks to you all, I found out about bikerafting, and I was like, okay, I can put aside, I had some hard boat prejudice. they're like, well, I love paddling whitewater in a hard boat. Why would I, make this switch? And I'm like, I'll carry a boat anywhere. I don't care how heavy it is. And then I was like, wait, this changes everything. I'm like, yeah, I'm like gonna find a boat used. I'm just like, the first thing I did with a Packraft was go bike rafting. Like I was just like, this is
That's
like what
amazing.
I want in the sport. And I love hiking, pack rafting, but like there's just something so special about and and I and really there's something kind of goofy about bike rafting that is it like it just like makes you more honest about the like why you're doing like that you're just kind of choosing to do this weird thing. And like I think that there's like something like more humble about it. Even if you're doing crazy things, even if you're like pushing yourself really hard, you still have to just remember that like I'm only doing this because I chose to like put this route together. And so I really like that kind of mix of like goofy and hard in the same place.
That's fun. And so you were also a big cyclist as well before, I mean,
Uh
water
like
and cycling.
like I had always cycled just like to get around. Like I mean, I grew up in South Florida. I know there's some mountain bikers there, but like didn't really mountain bike. So biking was just like a casual, like it was something I did casually. And it was kind of bike rafting again was where I was like, oh, like there's this like so it's like the two things kind of drew me in where like I had always thought of like if I'm going to choose an expedition, it's going to be, you know, a paddling expedition. So like the way I like to get outside and like go to remote places was by canoe mostly. And I really enjoyed whitewater canoeing, and biking was something like I did just like as momentary joy, or really just like a functional getting around. And then with bike rafting I was like, now I'm also like, it's pretty rare that I go on a bike packing trip without my raft, but I am also doing that and enjoying it. So it's this kind of weird, the multimodal is what brought me to both of these sports.
That's fun. I love how very different people get into bike rafting for different reasons and in different ways. So it's cool that the bike rafting got you into, or that got you into pack rafting. So do
Yeah.
you teach just as many pack rafting courses as you do bike rafting courses? We'll jump back to the guide service now. Tell me,
Yeah, I would say it's probably about 2/3 pack rafting. Because it's, I think a lot of people that or I'm working hard to convince people that bike rafting is approachable. And the pack rafting, I think for a lot of people, they're when they're learning about pack rafts, they're, so I have the people who are like, I'm doing a lot of backpacking. I'm thinking about getting into paddling. So they're kind of interested in pack rafting. I have people who are seeing the boats and they're like, that just seems more approachable than a hard shell kayak. I'd rather be in a self-bailing boat than with a skirt and in a kayak. So I'm finding it like the pack rafting alone, it's like really easy for people to like take that leap of the unknown into it. The bike rafting is there's a lot of like trepidation. Like I've had a few events this summer where it was like a biking event, but people could choose to do a bike rafting trip with me. And they were like, oh, maybe. And they're like, I'm not that tough. I was like, well, we picked a really easy route. We're like working on this. And it would be convincing them to get into the boats. And then they get in the boat and they just start laughing. And they're like, it really wasn't that big a deal. And I'm like, yeah, it's like you can ride a bike, you can paddle a boat. There's just this funny logistics thing in the middle that I'll help you with. Um, so I think there's more of the pack rafting that I'm actually selling. My goal is to get it to like 50-50, or maybe even a little more bike rafting. That's always, I mean, it's what I want to be doing. But I also, it's also easier to just go pack rafting and not have to get everyone's bike on everyone's boat and all that. But yeah, so it's a good mix.
Yeah, we've sort of found we only run like one or two bike rafting trips. I think next year we have two on the books, and then another person just said that they want to do one for their group of 6. But I mean, we had like 160 clients this year, and only I think 4 of them were the bike rafting. So it's not,
Yeah.
yeah, everybody needs to learn how to pack raft, but I don't like, I thought that we were going to do more bike rafting, but we're not. And I do think that it's a couple different things, but I do feel like it's a bit of an intimidation factor because it is 2 sports and it is hard. It's not like, I mean, a day trip isn't hard, but like multi-days bike rafting, it's definitely more challenging than just pack rafting. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the day trip is like a real sweet spot where it's a day trip of bike rafting is generally less strenuous than a day trip of biking. Because if you went biking for a day solid, you would be in the like 40 plus miles, or if you go bike rafting for a day, that might be 10 miles of biking, it might be 5 miles of biking. Yes, but then yeah, you're once it gets to overnight, we're like, where does all this stuff go? Um, and so I'm always looking at ways like, how do I carry more of other people's gear? And sometimes it's like, it's goofy, but sometimes it's a bike trailer. Sometimes it's like, like just having extra weight on me to like make it approachable. But yeah, it's that I think that is the yeah, that's definitely the trickier part.
yeah. So I'm curious, do you run trips? I mean, I guess you don't run them year round, do you? Like, are you seasonal as well?
It's like mostly seasonal. I am trying to create the idea of winter trips. I personally do winter paddling. It's been a few years now, but 3 years ago, I paddled at least one day of every month of the year. You like can't predict when that day is going to be. So I kind of have like a short list of people that I know will go. And I'm like, hey, we're getting, like we had a thaw, the rivers are running, we're gonna get snow. Wednesday might be a day that's more friends than it is clients at this point. But yeah, it's my season is really April to late October, early November is kind of the steady season.
Curious, do you guys have water all year round?
We have like there's a couple of dam controlled rivers that will have flow year round. And then so much of our snow is melting throughout the winter that we're getting sort of rivers, like even natural flow rivers will be starting to come up in it used to be April, March to April. Now it's February to March where you're starting to see those run.
Okay, yeah. Tell me a little bit more about like the inception of the pack rafting guide service. Like,
Yeah, so this is my third summer season of like the Packraft specific guiding, and I think it was 4 seasons of canoe guiding before that. And so when I started the canoe guide business, I worked with SCORE, SCORE, which is it's a federally funded program where there are local mentors, and it's a free program. And there happens to be one of their offices in Bangor, Maine, which is near where I live. So I worked with a mentor on business plans, filing for an LLC, insurance, all those sorts of things. And so I like had gone through all that with the canoe guide business, and then when I made the switch to pack rafting, I really like kept that business, but I have a like my LLC is doing business as Packraft Maine. And then a mix of it too came from when I was working for Outward Bound. I stayed around long enough that I ended up in like program management. So I was working on like developing courses and doing helping with safety reviews and that kinds of stuff. So like I was able to kind of remember policies like safety policies I'd worked on and kind of convert some of that to what it made sense for a single person business. And yeah, so it was a mix of like the SCORE mentorship. And then I eventually joined an organization called Maine Outdoor Brands, which is a nonprofit that sort of works with a mix of like nonprofits, land trusts, service providers, and product develop or like product companies. And they do a lot, like in their meeting, they have like a yearly meeting. There'll be workshops for businesses of various sizes. So I'm always kind of, still trying to keep up to date with what it is to run a business.
Yeah, totally. I totally get that. I'm taking a year-long leadership course sponsored by the state of Colorado. I want our company to be better, and I want to learn how to be a better leader for our company. So yeah, I hear you on that. So tell me a bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to say more?
Oh, like I was just gonna say, it's hard. I feel like so much of the advice is not geared to the like we're not even small business, right? We're like micro businesses and like this service provider, outdoor service provider, micro business is like we're such a we're like barely fitting on the Venn diagram of all the advice that's being given. So I both like I'm always like trying to find stuff, and then I'm like, okay, now I have the extra work of like filtering this information to like not be about selling products, not be about managing 18 or 30 employees. So yeah, it's a I feel like it's an extra challenge that we have.
Are you a one-man show?
I am, yeah.
So I'm curious, like what kind of growth you've seen since you started your Packrafting guide service, like generally, but also in the Northeast.
Growth in terms of the business is, I think that like what I'm getting like this last summer, I would say half of my like people coming on trips, I not only did I not know them, but I didn't know the person, I didn't know their connection, like how they found me. Where like previously it had been majority people I knew, or like, we were 1 degree, like we knew the connection between us. So like this last summer was this sort of move to, I was looking at Packrafting, saw you, now I'm here. So I'm and that is like showing me two things. One is that like I've been around long enough that I'm showing up in searches, and two, that like people are looking for Packrafting. And I'm looking around, I'm seeing more and more like used Packrafts for sale in New England. I'm seeing people in New England on message boards. So I see like there's all these signs that it's growing, but it's still not like, it's still, I think, much smaller than, when we think of in like Alaska, Colorado, Utah. So it's like, there's a lot of room for growth here still.
Which is really exciting, actually. So.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think in New England, people are finding out about the boats as much through advertising as they are directly from other packrafters. So, I think the influence of like REI, Cocapelli. So I think that like, and this it's like kind of there it's like it's a less extreme packrafting that's like catching on. Like I have a whole group of people who have come on trips to try Packrafts because they can't lift their sea kayak onto their car anymore. And like I think that's like, like that's like a New England demographic. And I don't know if that's in other places too, but it's like this whole like, there's the like non-extreme pack rafter, maybe like a more, like I would be really interested to see, like, and I don't know how you would even track it, but like in different places, like how many pack rafters are like from, like coming from these different groups. And my guess would be New England is like a little bit higher on that number.
That's really interesting because just had I helped the APA with corporate sponsorships, American Packrafting Association, and we just had a discussion about this very thing with one of the corporate sponsors, and I feel like there's, of course, all the different audiences for packrafting, but I feel like a lot of our clients, yes, they want to be really good whitewater paddlers, but a lot of our clients also are, they don't want to carry a heavy kayak, and this is a totally new avenue for them to be out enjoying the water in ways that they can't with a kayak, because the kayak is hard shell, it's heavier, it's for me it's a little scarier personally. Packrafts are so friendly and easy to learn in, so I feel like that's a huge demographic. And also the boats are small, so you can pack them away in your little city closet if you live in a little condo or something. Yeah, so I think that's a huge demographic that we're just tapping into right now, honestly. So tell me about, I want to ask you about your bike rafting route and your other cool projects, but I want to know what it is about Maine that is awesome for pack rafting.
So, I mean, for 12,000 plus years, people have been traveling Maine by water. Like since the glaciers receded, like there have been people here, and the best way to move through this area was always the water. So like they were making, around the time of the glaciers receding, it was dugout boats. Eventually, as you have more trees coming back, we actually get the birch bark canoe in this area. And to me, there's like a correlation between a birch bark canoe and a pack raft. Like it is, they're not exactly the same, but there's stories of, for going hunting, someone would hike in, get to the water they wanted to, and they would just build a really small birch bark canoe, and they would use it while they were there, and then they would leave it. And they were usually about they're like 8 to 10 feet long. They were rounder than a regular canoe, and they're just kind of made there. So I feel like there's this history of water travel and there's this, Maine is a state that is between, like with those small streams, ponds, bigger rivers and lakes, that it's really hard to go, more than a few miles without being to another piece of water. And we have these, massive river systems that crisscross the state. We have height of lands between watersheds that are, one river to another river is 2 miles away. And even, if you look at old, like traditional canoe routes in Maine, from whether they're indigenous canoe routes or things that like Thoreau was doing or things that summer camps were doing, people tend not to stay in one system. You like move from the Penobscot watershed to the Allagash watershed. So it's kind of this style of travel that's like that's been here forever, of we're taking our boats on land, we're getting back in the water. So I just think it's like Maine is a great place for multimodal travel. And so then there's a lot of really cool waterways that if you're willing to travel for 2 weeks, you can get to, and they're hard to get to by car. But that gets harder and harder to like have time to do, where some of those places now, if we hike in with a pack raft, we could do it in a 3-day trip, and we can get onto like class 2 to 3 whitewater that nobody else is on because they can't drive to it. And not that it's like every river's like that, but there's some like just amazing rivers, and there's just, beautiful stuff that's tucked away, no one's there. And the Packraft like opens that up without the need to drag a big canoe, like go on these longer trips to get there, we can kind of sneak in on shorter trips. And so, yeah, that's my argument for
It
pack
sounds
rafting in Maine.
like there's just a lot of possibilities that possibly other states don't have. And Maine is so incredibly beautiful.
There's a lot of rivers that I'm just finding all these little spots now that I ignored when like my mindset was like 17-foot tripping canoe. And like, I used to be like, well, I have to drive 6 hours, or I have to drive 3 hours, 2 hours, like a long way to get to this river that's like remote enough. And now with Packraft, I'm like, well, there's this small stream that I've never looked at that's like right near town. And I'm like exploring those as well as going further out. And they're beautiful. Like and I keep being like, nobody's here. Why isn't anybody here? And it's like, well, they don't like have the Packraft mindset.
It seems like a possible mecca for pack rafting, and you just need to get the word out there.
Yeah, it's not even about me. It's like, come check this place out. Like yeah.
Yeah, and have fun because it's just ridiculously fun. Now tell me about your route. Tell me all about like the idea, where it came from, why you decided to pursue it, and tell me about the sections that you've done.
So the idea is that there's just fun waterways, there's fun biking all the way from the New Hampshire border to the New Brunswick border. And I think some of this is like a little bit learning from you all, and like some things you've said about like, don't just give a route, like share locations, and like route planning is part of the fun. And I'm kind of an anti-competitive person. So the thought of there being like a fastest known time would really bum me out. So like there isn't a set route. And also if you tried it in April and you tried it in October, like the water would be so different that we need like lots of options. So I guess to step back to like the idea from it, one is like I was just trying to come up with ways to like convince people that Maine is worth, like, you're planning your bike rafting trip, where should you go? And I wanted to like create like a story that Maine was a place to do it. And I was looking at the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, which goes from Valley Forge, New York to Fort Kent, Maine. And I was looking at the Maine section of that. I was looking at the Eastern Divide Trail from Bikepacking magazine. And there's a part of it in Western Maine that's pretty close together. And I've paddled most of that, a lot of it in canoe trips. I've bike packed some of it, and just looking at those two right next to each other, and I was like, well, like we should be bike rafting this. And then there's some cool waterways that they're near land where there isn't bike access, where the landowners don't want people biking there, but I've gotten verbal permission that we can bike raft through there. So there's like some cool things where like if we're bike rafting, we can do a more direct route where we would be paddling through a section where a bike packer couldn't bike through. So just sort of all these places on a map just kind of started like, okay, this is possible. Like it went from like maybe it would be cool to like there are route possibilities the whole way. And so like currently it's starting near Lake Umbogog, which is on the border with New Hampshire. It continues up to Flagstaff Lake, which is where the Dead River starts, which is a classic like rafting run in Maine. From there, there's a few ways that get you to Moosehead Lake. From Moosehead Lake, we're traveling through like the AMC, Appalachian Mountain Club land, where there's the whole new gravel guide for that, through the Debskeneg Lakes and into Baxter State Park. And there's a really cool like bike packing loop people are doing around Katahdin Mountain. So this kind of involves some of that, but the hardest parts of the biking will just be paddling down the East Branch of the Penobscot. And from there, it's this is one of the more like less explored areas that goes through some like sections of farmland. but the hope is to get all the way over to the St. Croix River, which is on the New Brunswick border. And since it's not really a set route, some of these river trips people do is like paddling trips that are 5 days long. So I think you could you could make this last a very long time, or it's like picking a few spots on there where it has the whitewater you want, or it has the fishing you want, those kinds of things. So I would say I've been this Flagstaff to Baxter East Branch section. That's the part where I've done the most of. I've canoed a lot on the sort of the New Hampshire side, and the next sort of big chunk to figure out is the eastern part towards the St. Croix, is like figuring out the best connections there. Yeah.
Trying to unmute. Well, that is awesome. So, and how many sections have you done, and how many days have you spent on the water and the bike?
I mean, a lot of them I was doing before I even had this idea. So I've done like a number of trips on the East Branch. A lot of those have been like 2 to 3 day trips. There's some sections of it that I did as canoe trips. So like I've done a big piece of it as like a 3-week canoe trip. So like I know the water really well. And now what I'm doing is like even on just like day trips, going back and like filling in the biking sections to like make sure it's doable. And then it's, like I'm slowly adding resources as I find them. I have a good friend that works for the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, and he's one of their route developers. So he has a lot of knowledge of just like already there's a good bike route here, people can use it. So we're starting to add stuff, and then this coming spring, I'm trying to organize a few scouting trips to like get out there, and those will be probably 2 or 3 night trips. And we'll just be, doing sort of sections where it isn't clear whether we can go through, or like a section we think people will be excited about. And at this point, I'm like, would love to do the whole thing at once, but it'll probably be a little bit before I have time for that. And I'm just going to try and organize some of my guiding around the route. Just kind of like keep building in information here. And I've been chatting with a few people that were a part of like the Eastern Divide, to try and see if they're interested in, getting out there. And then like just there's some local, bike packers and packrafters that are excited about it. And yeah, it's like once you start planning this, you just meet like interesting people. Like I was chatting with like this canoe guide that he's just like, oh, well, I go biking all the time in this area. Like here's all my routes, and just like, shared all this like Gaia data of like places he's been. And he's like, these are the good ones, these are the bad ones. So the problem now is there's just more and more cool places to go. So it's like, how do we narrow it and like keep it to not just be go anywhere in Maine?
Yeah, I kind of had the impression that a lot of Maine is private property. So I'm curious how your routes address that issue.
Yeah, it is. So Maine is oof, like, so we're the most forested state in the country. Where I think we're 89% forest, and the majority of that is active timberland. We're seeing more and more conservation, but we have both forestry company. So most of the gravel roads we ride are private logging roads, and many of the logging companies just don't really care, but there's a significant number of them that say no biking on our lands. Some of the conservation groups, the Nature Conservancy doesn't allow biking in any of their land. That's something that they say they're reviewing, but it continues to be their policy. So there's some historical places that are just clearly known. If it's this land, you can't be on it. And then there are roads that are clearly marked as no bicycles on this road. The way access works in Maine on private land is unless it's marked, you have a legal right to be there. So, but what we're trying to do is like have the resources out there. So like if you're planning a trip, and before you get there, so you don't like get halfway through your route and then realize, oh, I can't be here. The problem with it is that a lot of the landowners don't want it to be well published, because then there's a little bit of controversy, then they can face controversy, where if it's, a faraway sign, nobody really knows about it except a few people. It's interesting, like the state of Maine now has an office of the outdoor economy, and they're promoting bike packing, gravel riding as this like great thing in Maine. And they're starting to bump into this too, where they had a outside magazine group come to ride around the state, and they couldn't figure out where to go ride. So the state is like starting to see this as an issue. They're paying the Bicycle Coalition of Maine to create more routes to sort of clarify this. So I'm hoping that like we're moving to like a little bit more clarity around the state on this, but it's a difficult thing. So some of what we're doing is we're sharing like, in these areas you can never ride. Don't even bring a bicycle in these areas. Like, with this permission you can go through. So we like, that's part of the route. Like, there's a lot of land north of where the route is, but that land is just completely off access. So yeah, it's a tricky thing. And I know that like for bikepacking, Maine held up the Eastern Divide Trail for a significant amount of time because of how complicated the land access is here.
Yeah, it's interesting. And do you guys have a similar problem that we have with waterways in Colorado? That like we have a lot of people who like basically the waterway is supposed to be open to anyone, but we have a lot of people who build like really low bridges so that you have to get off of the water and touch their property, and then they try to get you for trespassing. It's super irritating, but it's like a big problem in Colorado.
Yeah, Maine is pretty lucky. Our waterways are like highly protected, and like the culture will always take the side of water access. So like if someone was to try that, it would not last here. And I think spring flows also like have an impact on it, but like in Maine, you can't restrict overland access to water. If the land you own completely and like circles water, like people can cross your land to get to the water. So there's like a really long history of, public access on private land. The state tries to like regulate and manage it to keep everyone happy. But yeah, I've read some of the like those terrible stories out of Colorado, and like that's one thing where I feel like we are really lucky in Maine. Yeah, and it's one thing that's interesting is like Packrafts were such a like, our water access needs are so low. Like all we need, right, is like a trail to the water. And I've been trying to have these conversations where like Maine has a lot of like, well, this is what a boat access is, and they mean like a boat ramp. Because even like the canoes and kayaks often want, like a really easy path to the water. So there's landowners that are like, well, we don't want to do full water access. And I'm like, well, are you open to a trail that goes to the water? Like, well, that would be fine. So it's this interesting thing where like we're maybe being held back because there's this view of like what it means to grant water access.
Are you working with landowners in that, or I guess maybe the different organizations that you're working with are working with landowners to get more access?
Yeah, and I've I've been on some committees with like the Maine Office of Outdoor Economy, and others through Maine Outdoor Brands. There's been some like the state's been doing some strategic planning in sort of what the outdoor economy should look like. And then, conversations with land trusts, other things. So just really trying to, both the biking side is is getting, is like the clearer side to be in on, but in those conversations, I'm trying to bring up packrafting and bikerafting as well.
All right, now I want to hear about the other cool projects that you're doing.
So in the past, I've done a few programs with Diversify Whitewater. So Diversify Whitewater is a national nonprofit that's focused on getting just more BIPOC people into whitewater paddling. So I've partnered with a few Maine organizations, including Kindling Collective, which is a queer lending library, Inclusive Whitewater Maine, which is a indigenous run organization here, similar to Diversity Whitewater, which is focused on Maine. And so, yeah, we partnered to sort of run free paddling day events. And then this year we switched to just sort of doing them on our own. So through Inclusive Whitewater Maine, just kind of same idea, running free events. With Kindling Collective, I've partnered with them also to just lead a intro to packrafting trips for their members. And we've done that for 3 years now. I've worked with another organization, Confluence Collective, which is interested in getting more people into fly fishing. And so we did a day of paddling at the end of one of their paddling weekends. And yeah, a big part of my thinking about business is that partnerships bring more to the table than working on your own. And there's a lot of things that I can't offer, but if I partner with other people that's their skill set, I can now offer those things. A lot of those partnerships have been with businesses, some have been with nonprofits. So we have here in Maine, we have a program called Teens to Trails, which is a advisory group for middle school and high school outdoor clubs. So I've donated to their auctions. I've taken their staff members out on trips. So some of these like collaborations are like on the donation side. Some of them are like with Kindling Collective, we're both making money off of those trips. So I see both of those as really sort of valuable things. And I would rather give my time for a nonprofit to have a fundraiser than I would my money to a social media corporation. So my marketing plan tends to be donation based. I find it rewarding. Good things come from it for me. So it seems like a win-win.
Yeah, I'm with you. Why do you think it's important to get like people of color out in packrafts?
I'll start with like a little background on this that didn't come out so my mom was born in Cuba. She came to the United States when she was 7 years old. She was a part of what was called the Pedro Pan children. And so that was my mom at 7, my aunt at 6. My grandparents handed them over to Catholic nuns, and they came to the US without their parents. And I think at the time it was one of the largest movements of refugee children in the world. My grandparents were able to come, less than a year later. So there were some like Cuban children in a similar situation that end up like getting adopted, moving to Minnesota, and living their whole life without their family. So that's not my parents' story, but it's this interesting as a Latin person, there's like this bit of disruption in my story, a lot of parallels to thinking about immigration, refugees today. But as I learned, knowing my mom, knowing my grandmother, learning about my grandfather, they love the outdoors. And as I learn about, there's really interesting studies that Latin people are the most aware of climate change and are some of the most outdoor focused people in the United States. So I have this strong understanding that people of color, BIPOC people, queer people already love the outdoors. We're not teaching them something. We're just sort of adding access to a desire that's already culturally relevant. And then why I think packrafts are such a good tool for that is when we have a group of mixed abilities, a packraft is just this perfect tool that the person, their first day of paddling, and the person who's an experienced whitewater kayaker are both going to have fun on the same river. It's, one person could be doing more, and one person it's, we're giving them extra help, but it's this leveler where it is easy to get into, but it is also easy to develop skill quickly. And I'm always so excited by like someone on day one. They're working on maneuvers that we couldn't get to in a whitewater kayak or canoe because we'd still be, getting over the fear or like working on edging, where like we can have someone do a great S turn and then we can like get into edging later. It's this, when we want to share the access, when we want to share the thrill of whitewater to people who already have a love of the outdoors, the Packraft is, to me, the ideal vehicle for that. The other thing that I've been having this conversation with my friends at Kindling Collective, with my friends at Inclusive Whitewater Maine. There's so much of the BIPOC programming we see is focused on beginners. And I don't want to, I think that we need all that beginner access, but it's like this assumption that like, well, if you're queer, if you're BIPOC, you're a beginner. And that's just not, it's just like, not like, isn't necessarily the case. Like I know like badass boaters that are women of color, that are queer, and like, they're not going to the event because they're just like, well, we're just going boating. And so, yeah, like one of the things that I'm getting really excited about now is, I'm starting to see woofer courses for BIPOC and queer people. I'm starting to see like Maine guides trainings that are, for BIPOC and queer people. I'm seeing it start to expand where it's not just the beginner. We're seeing that like next step develop. And I think you get a glimpse of that even on a beginner day in the Packraft, where it's like we're accelerating people to the level where they have the confidence for those other courses. And the person who's showing up in the volunteer state and like is like, well, I haven't really Packrafted, but I'm a good kayaker. I'm like, well, this is going to be a fun, like slightly different thing for you today. And it's just cool to share a slightly different form of access.
Cool. I'm glad I asked that question. Thank you for the thoughtful response. I'm going to wrap up because we've been chatting for almost an hour. But thank you for taking the time to talk with me, Alejandro. And I look forward to meeting you in person in the fall.
Yeah, same. And thanks for all that you all do to promote bike rafting and pack rafting and enjoyment in the outdoors.
Light your fire by the river, sleep on the ground. Ramble, 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 it's the only way back home. See the crows come and tell your story to the smoke. What can't hold itself up on the land, I say.
Well, that is a wrap. If you want to download this podcast, we are finally on Apple as well as Spotify, and you can even find us in the NPR One app. There are also transcriptions of most of the episodes and show notes, links, and other information on our blog at fourcornersguides.com. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for who you want us to talk with, feel free to reach out to me anytime at thePackraftingLife@gmail.com. All right, have a wonderful fall full of paddling and adventures, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
We all live down